So what can we do if we're suffering from trauma? What can we do if we have a yogic practice but we're dealing with trauma from the past? So basically everybody suffers from trauma. Some people suffer from trauma to a severe degree, some people to a lesser degree. For some it might be quite mild, but everybody suffers from trauma to some degree or another. Any serious emotional event will impact us, and that gets stored in the body. So understanding how trauma works is quite important for understanding how we can respond to it, how we can deal with it. So trauma is actually stored in the system of nadis in the body, in the system of energy channels, and in the chakras. The chakras are major intersections of the energetic channels. And they're stored as blockages in these channels. That means that it's more difficult for the prana, for the energy to move through the channel when these traumatic blockages are there. And they're also stored as blockages in the chakras, which makes it more difficult for energy to move in the chakras. And as we progress on the path of yoga, we actually develop the ability to see within our body, and we can see these blockages, and we develop the ability to feel within our body, and we can also feel these blockages. And we can see and feel when these blockages are removed, when they're dissolved. And we can feel the difference between what it's like before they're dissolved and what it's like after they're dissolved. Now, all of the practices of yoga are designed to cause these blockages to dissolve. It doesn't matter if it's meditation. Meditation is designed to cause blockages in the energetic channels to dissolve. Pranayama, breathing practices, are designed to cause these blockages to dissolve. Asana practice is designed to cause these blockages to dissolve. And so everything we do with our yogic practice is helping to purify past trauma and to clear it out of the system. It doesn't actually have to be faced or addressed, it'll simply come up. And when these blockages are being dissolved, sometimes we do get flashbacks. We'll get a flashback of the traumatic event that caused the blockage. Sometimes we won't. We'll just be aware of that there's some kind of stickiness in the body or some kind of blockage preventing the flow of energy, and then it'll dissolve and then it'll be gone. And we won't especially know what it was related to. Other times, flashbacks can be strong. We can get quite intense flashbacks from past traumatic events as the blockage is being purified and cleared. Sometimes a blockage isn't dissolved in one go. Sometimes we have to come to it many times, and we might get flashbacks coming up many times, and it could be many times over days, weeks, months, or even years. Some especially stubborn traumas stored in the body can take years to fully purify and to fully clear out. But it does mean that we can rely on our yogic practice to purify trauma and to clear trauma out of the body and mind. Now, there are some situations where if trauma is particularly strong, it can be difficult or impossible to practice. That if we sit down to practice, that traumatic memory can be so overpowering that we can't actually do the practice that we were setting out to do. And so in that situation, practicing is not going to help. Spiritual practices are not going to help. And then there's other things that we can do. Therapy, obviously, is important. Seeing professional, qualified psychotherapists can help to remove past trauma. And Even basic things like walking, swimming, cycling, because the trauma is stored in the body, when we move the body, it can actually cause the blockages to release. Walking in nature is particularly beneficial. That's because nature, trees, rivers, mountains, contain a lot of prana, and that prana moves through us as we walk in nature. This is why people all over the world enjoy the experience of spending time in nature and being in its presence. So walking in nature, swimming, cycling, working in the garden, cleaning the house, anything that's gentle, active movement. And loving actions, doing things to serve others, to help others. That purifies the heart, and that can purify past trauma. But if past trauma is particularly strong and particularly troubling, do seek the help of a professional psychotherapist to help you work through that process, and then also making sure that you're active, doing things to help others in society. And then when you are in a position to do spiritual practices, and you can sit down to practice easily without any heavy traumatic flashbacks preventing you from practicing, then you can use spiritual practices to work through the trauma. But for most people, for 99% of people, spiritual practice alone is enough to deal with trauma that's stored in the body. And so we need to have patience. Some things, as I say, can take weeks, months or years to clear out. But eventually we get there, and we eventually end up with a system that is fully purified, where there are no obstructions, where prana can flow freely. And the experience of living like that is that it's a life that's peaceful, joyful, loving, and free. We're free to do whatever we want to do without any past karmas coming into play.